morning Year 2, welcome to Wednesday's English lesson. So this week we have been looking at a brand new book and our story has been called Sammy the Street Dog. So today we are going to be doing something called sequencing. Can you tell Miss Billick what sequencing is? Well done. That means putting the story in order, in chronological order. So from the beginning, the middle, and right through to the end. So we're going to have some pictures that are all muddled up, and our job is that we have got to sequence them, put them in order of the story. But before we do that, we need to remind ourselves of the story, Sammy the Street Dog. So, before you carry on with this video, I would like you to re-watch the video of Miss Billick reading the story, Sammy the Street Dog. So, here are some images from our story, Sammy the Street Dog, and they are all muddled up. And our job is that we need to cut them all out, and we have got to put them back in order. So, once you've cut them out, you should have lots of our images from the story that we are going to look at. So, now you have read the story, again, Sammy the Street Dog, you should be really familiar of the order and what happens. So, I'm just going to have a look now and try and think back to the very first image that I think was in the story. And I think, well, it can't be that one because they're trying to put the fire out there. I know Sammy was very curious of the grand building. That's St Paul's Cathedral. That's a little bit later on in the story. And so is that one because he gets trapped in there. I think it might be this one because I can see it says Pudding Lane, and that is I think that is the beginning image of the story that I can see here. So when I've done that, I'm going to move those to one side, and I'm going to order them down my page. So I'm going to stick that one there like that. And then I'm going to stick my next image underneath, the one that comes next. Let me have a look. So I know it's not those two. That one comes I think that one comes near the end. I think it might be this one, where Sammy is walking through trying to find somewhere safe in the city. So your first job is to order all of your pictures from the story down the side of your page. And what we're going to do now is we are going to write a sentence next to each image explaining what is happening in the story. So once you have sequenced your pictures from the story, we are then going to write some super sentences to explain what is happening in the story. So I've got my sentence strip out here to help me. I'm going to remember capital letters, finger spaces and full stops, and then always go over and check my sentence to make sure it makes sense at the end. So this is the first image I think that came in the story. This was at the beginning where I know Sammy was fast asleep. I thought he was dreaming peacefully. And then all of a sudden he was woken up by the smell of burning. And when he stood up, he could see the whole street was on fire. So I'm going to start my sentence by saying Sammy was fast asleep, dreaming peacefully. So Sammy is his name, so I need a capital letter. Sammy was fast asleep, dreaming peacefully. When all of a sudden he was woken up by the smell of burning. when all of a sudden he was woken by the smell of burning. And then I'm going to say that he saw the blazing fire raging through the street, because he is on the street. We know he's on Pudding Lane. And he saw so I'm not just saying a fire, I'm using a wow word, an adjective, a blazing fire. Raging. Raging through the street. Okay, so full stop, capital letter, I've used my finger spaces. Let's read it through to check it makes sense. Sammy was fast asleep, dreaming peacefully, when all of a sudden he was woken by the smell of burning, and he saw a blazing fire raging through the street. So they are my couple of sentences for my first image. Then I'm going to move on to my next one. Okay, so this was the next image that comes in the story. And here, this was where Sammy found a quieter street. He was a bit confused to start with because there was no fire and everyone was a lot calmer. It was less chaotic. And I know he went and found somewhere quiet to have a rest. So I'm going to think back to that last image where I know he ran for his life away from Pudding Lane. So I'm going to start by saying he, because I don't want to start with Sammy again, because I started my last sentence with Sammy. So he ran for his life to find safety. And I know it just wasn't him that was trying to find safety, it would be all the people in London as well. So he ran for his life to find safety. And then he noticed that this street was quieter and less chaotic. So I'm going to start this sentence by saying this street was quieter and less chaotic. So that means that there was less people running about all over the place. Less chaotic. And because of that, he started to slow down. Instead of running, he then started to walk. So I've used a conjunction there. So Sammy began to slow down. Began to slow down. And then I can remember that his fur was matted and blackened by the soot. So I'm going to say, poor Sammy's fur was all matted. He looks very sad there. Poor Sammy's, remembering my capital letter for Sammy because it's his name. Poor Sammy's fur was all matted And I remember he was exhausted, so he went to find a quiet corner in the street to have a rest. And he was exhausted. So I've used a better word than tired. I have used exhausted. And he was exhausted. So he curled up in a corner to rest. Okay, let's read it back through, check it makes sense. He ran for his life to find safety. The street was quieter and less chaotic, so Sammy began to slow down. Poor Sammy's fur was all matted and he was exhausted, so he curled up in a corner to rest. So I have used capital letter, finger spaces and full stops at the end of my sentences. I have read it through to check it makes sense. And then I would move on to my next picture. So I really want you to think carefully about your sentences. I don't just want a really simple sentence. Can you challenge yourself? Can you use some conjunctions? Can you use some wow words, adjectives to make your sentences really interesting? Once you've finished, children, don't forget to send a quick picture to your teacher. We can't wait to see if you have correctly sequenced the story, and we can't wait to read your sentences to go with it. Bye for now.